What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another edition of the Sheehan Show. Me, Sean Sheehan, here on Sherdog.com. And today I'm looking ahead to Cage Warriors 179 Rome, which goes down over in Ficlam in Rome, in Italy. And I'll tell you what, this is a very, very, very interesting card. And I think this is one of those cards, if you look at the cards for the rest of the year, it's actually jam-packed with title fights. And I'll get to that more in a second to talk about this card. But this is a card where if you look through this card now and you look through it in 5 years' time, you're going to see a lot of people who are Cage Warriors champions, are in the UFC, are fighting in big fights. And we often see that in Cage Warriors, and you can look back and, you know, what are we now, 179? I guarantee you if you look back at Cage Warriors 129 or something like that, there's going to be cards around then where you see guys litter throughout it. You'll see a Paul Hughes. You'll see a Jordan Vucinic. You'll see, you know, a Conor McGregor, a Carl Pinder, a Neil Seery, all of those sort of people. And this, to me, looks like one of those cards. I've put it. There's a lot of younger fighters in it, so I was doing a lot more work in terms of watching fights and studying them, because a lot of lads I'm seeing maybe for the first time or second time, whereas some of the more experienced heads and guys I would know an awful lot better. But there seems to be an awful lot of talent. We have a couple of headliner fights, which I'll obviously talk about. We've two big young Irish fighters on this card as well, which obviously, you know, being a bit biased here towards the Irish lads, we'll talk about them a little bit more as well and concentrate on that in this. But we will give the Italian guys and the big fights a look as well. Before we get into that though, and because I said there's a lot of young guys on this, right? But there's also a lot of guys who are, you know, some of the fights around the top, even Patrizzi, who is 7-2 in his career. You know, like Robin Roos just fought for the title, but he's, you know, probably there or thereabouts. Again, Stefano Paterno, you know, 23 fights into his career. He's in the main event, obviously. Knocking around there. There's a lot of guys. You know, even you look at like Solomon Simon against Walter Cogliero, whose name I butchered there. That's a fight at featherweight. You know, we could very well be talking about fighting for the title soon. And it's interesting because there's a lot of I mentioned the cards coming up towards the end of the year are stacked to title fights. I'm just looking at the slate here. Shaj Hack is fighting for the flyweight title. He's defending that. Liam Gittins is defending his bantamweight title. Harry Hardwick is defending his featherweight title. The Andy Clamp is going to be fighting for the light heavyweight title, and there's a women's title as well being started, and that's going to be very interesting as well, because obviously another belt is there. Kennedy Freeman is going to be fighting for that. So there's a lot of fights coming up, and there's going to be a champion, and then there's going to be someone who's going to have to be waiting in the wings to be next online. And if you're someone fighting on this 179 card, and you're touch and go there, well, it's a massive opportunity to put yourself in line. The second they win their fight, you'll go, well, I'm on a run here. I'm after winning the last fight. I won. I had the best win at Cage Warriors 179. I'm next in line. And that's a very good place to be in, I think, if you're one of those fighters. Because also as well, you know, Christmas is coming up, so you can get that fight, enjoy Christmas, and have your title fight after. So I think it's a big night for a lot of those fighters. Probably none more so, I would say, than that aforementioned main event with Stefano Paterno against Jorge Bueno. Very, very interesting fight. Watched a good bit of both of these lads. Seen a lot of Paterno before, and Bueno is kind of one of those guys that, you know, if you're tuning into this, you probably have seen him before, but maybe don't remember all of his fights. He's 15 fights into his career right now, and he's fought in Centurion, he's fought in KSW, he's fought in Cage Warriors before, fought in Octagon as well, and a guy who has fought some really, really good guys as well. Made his debut in 2017, but didn't fight then for 3 years. You know, obviously the pandemic comes. He only has one fight in 2020, but since then he's had a lot of fights. 3 fights in 2021, 2 fights in 2022, 5 fights in 2023, and this will be his 3rd fight in 2024. And in that time, some of the guys he has fought: Will Curry, Dominic Humberger over in KSW, who, if people haven't seen him, recently, we've talked about him on the podcast before. He's a really, really talented guy, and he's fought in some of the big KSW 79, KSW 88 as well. So that first one was the DeFries versus Duffy card, so he's used to fighting on big cards as well. And then Paterno, a similar sort of guy, still very young, only 29 years of age. He's 24 fights, I believe, into his career now, and he's been around as well an awful lot. Kind of found a home here in Cage Warriors over his last 2 fights. Won both of those fights and got finishes in both. Before that, he had a win in Octagon, 2 wins in Bellator before that as well. So this is not a guy who, is coming in, and he's had a long career and he's coming in after a few losses and trying to rebuild himself in Cage Warriors. Far from it. He won 3 fights in a row before he came to Cage Warriors. He was in Bellator before that, and he lost a couple there, but won a couple as well. And, we I suppose a lot of people remember him from Cage Warriors. 98 and 95, he fought Ross Houston, who was one of the top guys, obviously, at time. But he's been fighting for a very, very long time, and fighting good lads for a very, very long time as well. Making his debut all the way back in 2012. It feels like this is his time, and he's, without a shadow of a doubt, the reason he's the main event here, he's one of the most popular fighters in Italy. I remember talking to my good friend Sean Denny before one of the KSW cards, and he was assured to pipe me out on that, like a guy who's travelled over there and watched a lot of fights in mainland Europe, let's say. And a very popular fighter is Paterno. He fought in the Bellator Dublin show as well against Ian Pascu. Again, another guy who's well used to fighting on big shows and all of that. Very dangerous with his fists, but standing and on the ground. A decent wrestler, I would say, with some good submissions. He's a quick starter who, doesn't like to go to decisions. The earlier finishes, the better. He's big leg kicks. Lands loads of check left hooks against aggressive guys. He fought Ali Salatani, who's also on this card. We'll talk about him later on. In his last fight, I believe. Let me just check that there. It was his last fight, indeed. And he kept catching him on the way in. Now, that was a bit of a longer fight, although he did get the finish in the 3rd round. He has 15 finishes out of his 18 wins. 8 fights have gone to the decision, including 1 draw. But he, as I said, he doesn't like that. On that Salatani fight, listening to the commentary, Paul Redzer was on the commentary there, and he said he'd like to see more jabs out of Paterno, and I couldn't agree more. I think it was great commentary. Seems to be a lot of big shots, Seems to be a lot of, I'm going to throw absolutely everything at this and kind of set nothing up, and that kind of works at times, but when you go up the levels and you fight guys who will kind of pick you off, like there's a few other guys in this card, even younger guys, and I'm saying, you put him in there with a guy like that at his weight class, and it's big trouble. So I think what he's very good at is he is a well-rounded, kind of strong guy who's a very hard out and a very, very tough guy, never been finished in his career in those 23 fights. That says a lot, considering where he has fought and some of the guys who he has fought. So a very, very dangerous guy. Jorge Bueno on the other side of it, then, you look at I mentioned some of the guys he fought. You look at the first few minutes of that Will Curry fight. A lot of people, if you don't know Will, and a lot of people do, but he's this big, strong middleweight, big, muscular guy. And what did Bueno do? He went across the cage and he took him down, like, straight away. And he's very good BJJ. They said in one of the commentaries of one of the fights, he's been doing BJJ since he was 12, and most there isn't a whole pile of tape on him, and most of it is on the floor. But what I would say about his stand-up is he's some good inside shots. He goes for the ground very, very early now, and I'd be interested to see how that works out. Like, what did I say about Paterno? His kind of inability to use his jab and control a fight that way is probably his biggest issue, and you're fighting a guy who wants to get inside and take away that distance from you and take you down. That could be trouble for Paterno. Now, I think it'll be a very, very tough fight for Bueno based on the power of Paterno. Paterno's ability to defend takedowns as well is good, I would say, and the fact that he's offensively pretty good as well. I could see a situation where Bueno tries to get him early, and you could just see those hips kind of pushing and him getting on top. Now, I wouldn't be surprised at all if Bueno went for something from the from the bottom. He is he's a guy who doesn't have a whole load of submissions on his ledger, and a lot of them, I think all three of them actually, in fact, are rear naked chokes. So what's the bottom game like with triangles and arm bars and stuff? Who knows? But at the same time, in MMA, he's fought a lot of higher level fighters, and probably he would be, he fought Jorge Nascimento in his third fight type of thing. He's that sort of guy, so that's not easy to do at that level of MMA. Look, if I'm given the pick for this, I think Paterno will win. I think he will shake off the takedown. I think he'll land a few of his shots, and I think the power maybe will tell as this fight goes. But it's one I'm very definitely looking forward to, and to seeing how it kind of shakes out. Next fight I want to talk about here is Simone Patrizi against Konstantinos Teles. I believe it's pronounced after I probably absolutely butchered it though. Do you know what this fight is? This is a fight between two talented young green guys. Patrizi 7-2 in his career now, 5 finishes in the 7 wins there. Made his debut back in 2018, but again, during the pandemic, didn't fight at all between 2019 and 2021. Came back and had a loss to Dimitri Grelin. Actually lost to him again. He fought in Golden Cage first, and then fought in Cage Warriors and lost to him again. So those are the only 2 losses. The only one man ever has beaten him in his career. And it was the best guy he fought. I think Grelin, everyone knows about him. He's a very, very good fighter. And the other side of it then, Konstantinos is he's fighting out of Greece, and he's an 8-3 record. Lost his last fight to Jan Key-Hagens, but started that fight relatively well. His other loss before that was to John Mitchell in UAE Warriors, who again is a very, very good fighter. We saw him in the European PFL tournament. He's an Irish guy as well, so I know him very, very well. But Teles is a talented guy. I was surprised to look at his record and see he's only 1 knockout in his 8 wins. He's 5 submissions as well, so 6 finishes in 8 wins is pretty good. But at the other side of it, you look at his game, and one part of his game that I think is absolutely fantastic, high level, are his kicks. Big knees inside, big kicks to the body, good leg kicks. Very impressed as well by his head movement. Lovely combos. And, when you see all of that, you're kind of thinking, God, the level he's fought at, you think he should be getting a few more finishes. And now, there's 2 ways of looking at that. And I would lean towards the second way, but here's the first way. He just doesn't have a lot of power. And I don't think he has a lot of power, but the second way is I think at one stage it'll click for him, and he will start getting finishes, and he will start collecting with guys and knocking them out, because he looks like such a talent guy. Like some guys, you look at him, you think, this is, you'll have to find another way to win. It's not going to be your, technical ability. But with Teles, I think it can be very, very technically sound. For me, looking in as obviously as a layman. Very, very impressed with him. He has a takedown in his back pocket as well, but he is, as I said, both of these guys, very green, a tad green here. I think Patrizi is even more green, to be honest. He's a boxer, doesn't have the best takedown defense in the world, but a very, very good athlete. Looks like he can grow into a good fighter. But one big issue, I think, for him is, and this happened, I watched the Grillian fight, but it happened in one of his other fights as well that he won. There's a tendency for him to panic a tad. And it's not, and I want to specifically say this, it's not that he's not afraid. He's actually the opposite. I think he's a very brave fighter, and he actually, when he does get hurt, or when he does slip over, he's in a bad position, he always fights back. So I think the opposite of him being afraid or anything like that. But he kind of slips over and he falls, and there's a tendency to panic a little bit in certain situations. And that is something that I think a guy who is 9 fights into his career, this is a guy who needs not 9 fights, he needs 19 fights, he maybe needs 29 fights to become, the guy who he can become, and I was looking at his amateur record. He's only fought twice as an amateur. And there are certain places around the world that's hard to get amateur fights and it's hard to get experience. And, I think that might be the case here. So, I'm just checking, are the odds up on this yet? I'm recording this obviously a little bit early, so I don't believe they are, but I'd be interested to see the odds in this fight because Patrizi, the Italian guy in Italy, and the odds aren't up yet. No, will he be favourite going into this? My pick is definitely Constantino Celis. I like him an awful lot. I like his game. I think something will click. I think it'll probably be a decision, as I said, because Patrizi is very, very tough. But I like him. I do like him in that fight. Let's move on. Let's talk about Ali Sahatali, who I mentioned earlier on. It's a very, very big fight for him as well. In this welterweight division. I didn't mention James Sheehan earlier on. He was supposed to fight Yanis Bakar coming back from was it the Ultimate Fighter or was it the Ultimate Fighter, I think. But there was an injury there, so that fight didn't happen. Interesting to see if that fight does happen or not, but there's a couple of big welterweight fights here. The Leon Aliu, Kadim Da fight, this fight, Manuel De Valle against Sergio Galvini, and you can throw in a few more into it as well coming up over the next couple of weeks. Even the Paterno fight, it's a 175 catchweight, but you could throw that into the welterweight mix there as well, or maybe even the middleweight. Is that right? Yeah, middleweight mix. That's easy for me to say. Now, Salatani has lost his last fight, and he lost to James Sheehan previously, so that's a tough one. But he has a name. He's fought a lot of good guys over the last while. He has wins over Jamie Richardson, a guy who's been obviously in the championship reckoning for years and years and years. He beat Kirill Medovsky over in another promotion. He's fought a lot in Brave, and he's fought against Alex Lahore. He's a win over Nathan Jones, and been fighting for a minute now since 2012 as Sanatali. And his opponent here, I love his nickname, Giacomo the Boar Michaelis, 6-1. His one fight was in 2021. He lost that, and he's won 3 in a row since. And you know what? I was watching him and very, very impressed by him. I like him. He's a southpaw. He reminds me of Chael Sonnen. He considers himself a ground fighter, which would be good, but he's a very patient. He throws that left hand, and he seems to have power in it, a little bit like Chael. If you watch back to Anderson Silva first fight, you'll see that. Very good defensively. Probably a little bit of a better striker than Chael, to be honest, but gets in very low on the takedowns like Chael as well. Pulls the calves out from under you, ankle picks, and he picks his spots very well to go for it. And once he goes for it, even if the spot that he picks is good and it goes bad, he'll continue to go for it. He'll give up a position and then attempt to rescue it in order to get a takedown. And he's patient on the ground too. Sometimes I think the higher level goes, that could get him stood up. But he does look to pass. And when he can get in a good position to land shots on the ground, he is very good at landing them. Again, very, very Chael Sonnen-esque. So big fan of his. And in Salatani, very aggressive. I talked about the Paterno fight. Very, very aggressive. Likes to leg kicks, but likes to eat them too. Better jab than, Paterno, especially as we talked about, but better jab than a lot of guys. Not the fastest, not the most athletic guy in the world. And I think the biggest issue for a guy like Salatani is his jab is good. His right hand after it is good. But when it's the third shot, when it's, when you have to kind of be an athlete to get to that next level, to land those big combos, that's where he struggles. And I think a guy like that is almost better off to dumb it down, simplify it. Throw your jab, throw your 1-2, throw your jab, throw your 1-2, mix it up a little bit with leg kicks and different things like that, which he has in the back pocket. But he tends to kind of like cross his legs and fall over himself a tad when he tries to throw the 3 and 4 punch combos. And it just doesn't work for him. And a guy who is 21 fights into his career, 30 years of age, having fought for the last 12 years, that's not a thing that's going to change at all. You need to change the way you fight, the way you tactically fight, I think, rather than the technique of it. So that would be one thing I would put. But he is a BJJ black belt as well. We talked about Michaelis on the ground. Will not be an easy fight. Again, he took Paterno down as well. Let's not forget Sanatali did. His wrestling is not bad. So you put the BJJ black belt with the good wrestling. That's interesting here. So it might be, sometimes a wrestler versus wrestler fight ends up a striker matchup. And I wouldn't call Sanatali a wrestler by any means, but he can wrestle. And I think he actually should wrestle more, to be honest. So yeah, interesting fight. Who wins it on the feet? It depends. I think the way Sanatani fights, if he throws that jab, if he throws the right hand behind it, and very little else, I think he's a great chance here. Michaelis has power on that left hand, but I don't think he's patient on the feet, but I don't think he's as confident on the feet as Sanatani. Now, is he as good on the feet as Sanatani? It's hard to tell. Really. So, interesting fight here. I think there's a lot of unknowns, and I'd be interested to see the betting line on this, because I don't think there's much between them altogether. And again, with this one, I think Michaelis might be a bit more of a confident wrestler than Sanatani is, even though I think maybe Sanatani's could be better. So, interesting. A very, very interesting fight, and we'll see how that one goes. One of the other big fights I want to talk about before I get to some of the undercard fights and some of the obviously the two Irish guys I want to talk about is Kadim Dia against Leon Aliu, which I believe is on the main card as well. So yeah, this is I believe fourth from the top on this card. Watched obviously a lot of Leon Aliu down through the years, and he's a guy who's he's a finisher, big wild power strikes. I've often said Leon Aliu fights like a heavyweight, and I stand by that. I think he does 11-4 in his career. Been in there with obviously James Webb, and won that fight. He fought in the Contender Series. Then after that, came back to Cage Warriors, and he lost to Will Curry and Darren Stewart, but he's win over Arlen Carlos in the middle of it, and very interesting, because what happens here if, and I know this is down a weight class, or two weight classes even, James Webb wins that title in a couple of weeks' time, could be some conversations about, might be eating a few burgers to get up there very, very soon. And Kadim Dia, the opposite then, 27 years of age, 5-0, 3 finishes in there as well. Fought Mushal Azlani last time, whose name I always feck up. 3 fights in a row in Cage Warriors, 3 fights as an amateur as well, so very, very young in his career. What I see from Dia is a guy who's very strong in the clinch and very good takedowns, very good at advancing position, huge ground and pound, and looks like a guy well able to use his jiu-jitsu and all of that as well. He only has the one submission so far, but look, 5 fights into his career, I think that will probably increase from here. His striking, though, I don't know whether it's good or bad, to be honest. It doesn't look good, we'll put it that way. He has fast hands, but he's awkward. And he's one thing that doesn't look awkward, looks very good. This fast switch knee he has, throws it right up through the middle. What fight was I watching where he threw it? It was the Musha Azlani fight, I believe. He shot short shots inside as well. Look weird, but they're good. And for a guy who's good wrestling himself and good takedowns, he does get taken down himself, but he goes for leg locks and he gets out of it. A very interesting guy. He's, again, doesn't look amazing, but very, very effective in a lot of different ways. Now, it does look amazing on the ground, but I'd be interested. This Ian Dean obviously thinks a lot of him to put him in there with Leon Aliu. Big test if he gets through this. I wouldn't at all be surprised to see Kadim Dia fighting for a title or very close to it in the foreseeable future. So definitely one to keep an eye on there. One of the other fights before I get to the Irish lads and some of the undercard fighters here is Robin Roos. I mentioned him earlier on. He's fighting Mario Minaj in the middleweight division. Mario, don't know a whole lot about him. There isn't a ton of tape on him. Obviously, he fought for a round and a half against Patala last time out. Lot of submissions. Looks, he's a big guy for the weight as well, 6'4", and he's fighting against a guy, Robin Roos, who I'm sure he'll be looking to take down. Roos, a real talented striker. He fought Dario Belandi for 5 rounds last time out, and he did well at the start. Belandi kind of took over, destroyed Kevin Fryer before that. Very interesting fight to see where Mario, I suppose, is at this stage of his career coming out of Italy as well. And, for Roos, I think there's a lot of upside to Roos. I think Roos is one of those guys that Cage Warriors would like to have around. And, his wrestling defense is very good up until a point. I think the fact this is 3 rounds as well will definitely help him. I think he needs to kick a lot more than he kicked the last time as well. So we'll see how that all works out for him. And one of my favorite fights in this is Alessandro Giordano against Rafael Hudson. Hudson fought Kasan Magomed Sharapov in Bellator. He fought Kieran Clark on short notice as well. Fought Sylvester Miller. Really, really, really good guys on his record. Fought a couple of times as well. He's fought an Octagon. So, a guy who hasn't won any of the big ones yet, but is an effective guy, a finisher. All 9 of his wins, all by finish. 6 of his 7 losses are inside the distance as well, so that tells you an awful lot about him. And then Giordano 8-3, 6 finishes in his wins there, and he had a massive win last time out, beating Michele Martignoni, the former champion in Cage Warriors, if I'm not mistaken, who beat Dominic Wooding. 2-fight win streak now, beat Dominic Kelly as well, or Sam Kelly, sorry. Had lost to Nathan Fletcher a couple of fights before that. So big fight here, I think, for Giordano on home soil. As I said, the power he has, I think, will be good against Hudson, but Hudson's not an easy out. It took Kieran Clark 3 rounds to finish him. Other lads, he's lost in the 3rd round and the 2nd round as well. Lost, so even though he does get finished, is as I said, not an easy out at all. So you'd expect Giordano to get through it, but would you at all be massively shocked by an underdog win there? I'm not so sure. So, a few other guys to mention: Giuseppe Ruggiero, he's 8-1, looks a real good prospect. He's fighting in the featherweight division against Antonio Souza. Lucas Barando, who's fought a good few times now, 4-1, but he's a guy who's definitely making a name for himself on this card as well. There's a lot more, I suppose, on the undercard there, but the 2 I want to concentrate on, the Irish guys. I left the best to last. Two very interesting guys, and 2 guys who kind of have came up similarly but differently at the same time. Let's start with Solomon Simon. He's fighting Walter Cogliandro. I think I pronounced it better that time. And this is a massive step up for Solomon Simon. And you know what this signifies to me? That Ian Dean believes in him. And watching back Solomon's last fight against Hugh McKinsey, I obviously watched it at the time. He got the finish, was very impressed by it. And at the time, it's an Irish fighter, and we're trying to react immediately to it, talking about obviously in the podcast and stuff the next day. But now, it happened in April. Having time to kind of think about it, watched it back a few hours ago here today. That was probably a better performance than we gave Solomon credit for. He looked so good. He looked sharp. And the one thing I would say about Solomon, I was at a Solomon Simon. Okay, he made his debut in 2023, 4 fights into his career, but I was at a Solomon Simon fight in 2018. I think, that's how long Solomon Simon has been fighting as an amateur. One of the most decorated, long tenured amateurs in Irish MMA history. And he's fought, you look some of the guys he fought. He fought Dennis Frimpong, Andrew Barrett, Ryan Shelley, who we've seen in Cage Warriors, Emil Piatak, who went on. I think he had a good run in one of the IMAF tournaments as well. And he's fought in the IMAFs himself as well. Very, very, very good amateur, and a guy who fought a lot of amateur fights, lost a lot of amateur fights, won a lot of amateur fights, but since he's become a professional, it's all changed, and he's won them all. But the one thing I noticed about that last fight, he looked like an experienced fighter. This guy made his debut in January 2023, so he's less than 2 years as a pro. But he looked like a guy who's experienced, and he is, because he's had so many amateur fights and been around for such a long time. And I think that's a benefit for him against guys who are 4-0, 5-0, 6-0, maybe 10-0 even in in his vicinity. But Ian Dean saw that, obviously, and has given him a guy who's not any of those, but he's 14, 5-1. He's been fighting for a long time. He's 32 years of age. He's not fighting a boy here. He's fighting a man. Won 4 of his last 5 fights. Has fought, Yves Landau over in Bellator. Has been in Cage Warriors before. Fought Steve Amiable. He's been fighting since as a pro since 2016, and he had a lot of amateur fights as well. Since 2013. So very, very experienced, very, very good fighter, and a big, big test for Solomon. On Walter, just first of all, the first thing I watched a couple of these fights, getting taken down is definitely an issue for him. Now, will Solomon go and try to take him down? I suppose we'll see. I'll talk about that in a second. But Walter always hurts you when you take him down, whether he goes for a guillotine or he does the McGregor elbows. Very, very good. He's also very good defense on the ground, good cardio too. A lot of guys you see him, they get taken down and then they get up and they're shot, no good anymore. He's not like that at all. Very good when he gets back up, hard leg kicks. He snipes with punches behind an active lead, touching hand. And he's very good. He's patient, but when he lands one, he lets him go. So a tough guy. Whereas Solomon, again, I'll throw the experience word out there. I did talking about a podcast a couple of times on this on the Sheehan show already that I did over in Severe May, talking about the prototypical fighters of today, and you have your Leon Edwards type of fighter, or you have your Habib Nurmagomedov type of fighter, or your Peter Yan type of fighter. I think Solomon somewhere between like the Yan and Leon Edwards type of fighter. Now, I'm not saying he's as good as they yet or anything like that, but very stoic in the way he fights, technically good. Again, 4 fights into his career, so I don't think he has shown, is he a big knockout artist? Is he a big submission artist? Is he going to be is he going to develop into this really good wrestler, or a really good control fighter, whatever it might be? That hasn't been shown yet, but what has been shown is any situation he's put in, or he puts his opponent in, or the fight goes to, he has control there. He doesn't panic. I spoke about one of the fighters earlier. He put in a bad position, he panics immediately. Now he's tough and he comes out of it and it's grand. But Solomon doesn't panic in the situations. Now that can be good and bad, to be honest. And when you're fighting a guy who's way more experienced than you, we saw it with Paul Hughes and AJ McKee last week. Now Paul Hughes was able to get through it and was able to win. But those more experienced guys put you in a position where you maybe haven't seen before, or that it's awkward to fight out of. And I'm sure Walter will do that. Let's say if Solomon wins the first round or is winning early. And then it's up to Solomon to adjust and kind of get out of that. Now, again, more experienced in the 4-0 shows, but he's going to need it in this fight. Very, very, very interesting. Do you know what? I don't usually show bias here, but I'm the Solomon fight's a way tougher fight than the Conor McCarthy fight, which we'll get to in a second, but I'm going to pick both guys here. I'm going to pick Solomon in that fight. So let's talk about Conor McCarthy. He's fighting Gianluca Rocca. Let's talk about Gianluca Rocca just quickly, first of all, because I'm going to spend a bit of time here on Conor McCarthy, and you'll understand, I think, when I say that, but in years to come as well. Gianluca Rocca, 30 years of age. This guy's a good fighter, I'll tell you, and he's been in there with some very, very good guys as well. Fought James Power last time. I put him on his arse, knocked him down straight away. Fought Michele Pijani, went to a decision with both of them. Has a win in 29 seconds in his fight before that on Cage Warriors, so not some rinky-dink promotion. And has won fights before that as well. He was on a 6-fight win streak at one stage to start his career. And as I said, knocked down James Power, but a very, very dangerous early. Very dangerous early. So this is, he always manages to get the fight to the clinch as well. Does Rocca, which is unusual, but he's a dangerous striker early, and I think Conor McCarthy has to look out for that. So let's talk about Conor. He's 2-0. Great nickname, Conor the Hot Stepper McCarthy. He's fighting out of SPG Nace. Nace is in Kildare, which is just outside of Dublin, and the gym is run. I think it's owned by Conor McGregor, actually, and Peter Queally, but Peter Queally runs the gym and he trains, and I believe Sergei Pikulski is there as well, who is the SPG wrestling head coach type of thing. And they have developed a really good team there. Max Lally's training there, and there's a few other lads training there as well. But Conor McCarthy is their guy. I talked to Peter about him before on this, if you might remember. He's 2-0 now. Really good amateur. Won the Irish National Championship as an amateur, and fought a good few fights as an amateur as well. Got one lovely head kick at one stage in the Irish National Championships, and he's 2-0 with 2 finishes as a pro. One of them was a lovely head kick against Rafael Oliveira. That fight was punching bag level, so he just went out there and destroyed him. His next fight, though, Lanza, came in and he went for Conor. He absolutely went for him, made it awkward on him, and then Conor ended up finishing him. Lovely check hook to start, and then another shot to kind of finish it at the end. Conor just graduated last week, I believe, from DCU, if I'm not mistaken, with an engineering degree, which he was doing for a long time, obviously, as he was fighting as an amateur and an early pro. So now he's concentrating on the fighting, and what a guy. What a fighter to look forward to. All right, so we've been there, myself and a few of the other lads, covering the sport in Ireland for the last few years, and we told you about, Ian Gary. Before that, we told you about Conor McGregor and Carl Pendred and all of them, and we told you about Paul Hughes, and the next guy we're telling you about is Conor McCarthy. And this guy is an absolute beast of a fighter, really good athlete, and I couldn't give anyone a better compliment than to say this: he has a fantastic jab. You look at a fighter and you see their jab, you see the way they throw it, the way they land it, and I do anyway. I don't know about you, I get excited. I get so excited. And watching back, I've watched all of Conor's fights before, but watching back, especially the 2 pro fights, and especially the actually the first fight, God almighty, that jab. The way he fights bouncy, but bouncy from the knees rather than bouncy from the feet, if you want to put it that way. He moves around at the hips and the knees. Very good defensively, and I love the way he kind of, he's like dipping up and down, bounce, and when he dips down, he comes up with the jab, and it's an all-in-one swell movement, and he lands it so accurately, and lads are going to be trying to take him down non-stop. Very good takedown defense. Very varied as well with his shots. A good leg kick, but those head kicks, as I said, he's at least 2 head kick knockouts anyway that I've seen. And you know what he does as well? He goes for it. He hits a lad, he'll hit him again and again and again and again. He will absolutely go for it. This guy has it all. And now he's 2 fights into his career, so let's not go overboard, right? But he looks a good athlete. He looks technically good. He looks strong. Let's see when he's pushed up in his collar. Let's see when, the bit more experience comes when he fights bigger guys. You never know how it's going to go, but it's very hard not to get excited by a guy like Conor McCarthy. Very, very, very hard. Peter Queally seems to be a really good trainer as well under his tutelage. A guy who's been there and done that, knows exactly, what he's doing. So I'm very excited about Conor McCarthy, and I think you should be too, to be honest. So tune in to that, and we will leave it there. Cage Warriors 179 goes down over in Rome in Italy. It's on UFC Fight Pass if you want to watch it. It's on November 2nd, and I will leave it there. Thank you very much for tuning in. My name is Sheehan for Sherdog.com, and I'll see you all next time.